The diner had been closed for 4 years, and Gary hadn't fought her for it once. That should have been the first sign. Sylvia stood at the counter with a folder her mother had left in the drawer under the register. 3 pages? County letterhead. A complaint filed against this building in January 2019. 14 months before Gary asked for the divorce. The field marked complainant had a company name on it. A name she recognized from the settlement paperwork. Gary's company. He hadn't left her the diner because it was worthless. He'd made sure it was worthless first. She had driven out to Mays that morning with no particular plan. That was how most of her mornings went now. Without a plan, without a schedule, without anyone waiting on her to be somewhere by 8. 11 months since the divorce was finalized. She still woke at 6:15 out of habit, the way you keep flinching at a door that no longer squeaks. And May's Diner sat on Route 9 at the edge of Clover Hill, Tennessee, between a tire shop that had changed hands twice and a farm supply store that hadn't changed at all. The sign above the door said May's in her mother's script. Hand-painted in 1998, the M faded at one corner where the afternoon sun hit it every day without fail. Her mother had been dead 3 years. The sign was still hers. Sylvia's key still worked. She hadn't expected that. Inside, the air was the particular cold of a building sealed too long. Not damp exactly, more like held. Every surface had a thin layer of gray dust. The vinyl chairs, red once, had gone the color of old brick. One of them sat tipped against a table near the window, one leg in the air, as if something had startled it. The counter still held a coffee mug. Whoever had locked up in January 2020 had left it there, handle facing out, like someone was about to pick it up. She didn't touch the mug. She went behind the counter instead, opened the cabinet below the register out of habit, and started going through what was left. Rubber bands gone brittle, a box of mismatched paper clips, a spiral notepad, her mother's handwriting on the cover, orders, spring 2019, a small laminated card with the Wi-Fi password for a network that no longer existed, a birthday card addressed to Sylvia from someone who'd signed only T. She didn't know any T in the folder. Manila, letter-sized, the cheap kind with the metal brad her mother had always used. On the tab in her mother's small tilted script, County, March 2020. Sylvia set it on the counter. She looked at it for a moment. Then, she filled a bucket with water from the utility sink in the back. It ran brown for 4 or 5 seconds before it cleared, and began wiping down the nearest table. She would get to the folder. The table took longer than it should have. The dust had settled into the laminate grooves, and she had to go over it 3 times before it looked right. By then, the bucket water was gray. She went back to the counter. She opened the folder. The complaint was dated January 14, 2019. 3 pages on Harlan County Health Department letterhead, stapled at the corner. A formal report of alleged health code violations at May's Diner, 4 and 12 Route 9, Clover Hill, Tennessee. The allegations were specific. Grease trap not up to code, improper food storage temperatures, evidence of pest activity near the dry goods. The kind of violations that could shut a place down. The kind that, if you didn't know any better, you'd assume were true. At the bottom of the first page, in the field marked, Complainant, Hargrove Property Solutions, LLC. Sylvia read it twice. Then she set the page down and looked at the coffee mug on the counter, handle still facing out. She picked up the dish rag and wiped the outside of the mug. It came clean. She set it in the drying rack. She knew that name. It had appeared once in the divorce settlement paperwork, a single line item in Gary's asset disclosure, listed under business interests, non-operating. Her attorney at the time, a man named Clifford Bro, who wore the same brown blazer to every meeting, had flagged it briefly and then moved on. Shell entity, he'd said. Nogue. No active revenue. Nothing to divide. She had believed him. The truth was she'd been believing things like that for a long time, not because she was naive, but because it was easier than the alternative. Gary had a way of presenting a decision as already made, and she had a way of not pushing back on things that were already made. 31 years of that will teach you not to ask certain questions. She was starting to understand that not asking had its own cost. She folded the complaint back into the folder and put the folder in her tote bag. Then she stood in the middle of the diner for a long moment. The drip from the utility sink in the back, steady, patient, one drop at a time. Outside, a truck downshifted on Route 9. A fly somehow moved along the window glass. She left the folder on the counter, not in her tote bag. On the counter. She picked up her bucket and moved to the next table. She didn't take the folder home that day. Or the next. On the third morning, she drove out to May's, walked in and picked it up off the counter before she'd even taken off her coat. If this story is staying with you, subscribe. There are more like it, and they're all waiting. Sylvia had kept Gary's books for 23 years, not as an employee, not as a partner, as a wife, which in Tennessee in 1998 meant you did what needed doing and nobody wrote it down. She had a head for numbers. Her mother always said that, the way some people say, she has her grandmother's eyes. T as though it were a feature and not a skill. Sylvia had learned bookkeeping from a library copy of a textbook she'd returned 6 weeks late. She'd taught herself payroll software on a computer Gary bought for the restaurant supply business he ran out of a warehouse on Depot Street. For 23 years, she had reconciled accounts, tracked receivables, filed quarterly taxes, and caught 2 separate billing errors with their biggest supplier that had saved Gary, by her own calculation, just over $40,000 total. She had done this without a desk of her own, without a title, and sat with a single year appearing on her Social Security statement. In the settlement, Clifford Bro had negotiated on her behalf for spousal maintenance and a share of the marital home. Gary had taken the house on Mercer Road, the joint savings, $43,000, and the Tahoe. She received a lump sum of $28,500, which Clifford called reasonable given the circumstances, tea in the diner, which nobody called anything at all. What Clifford had not done, what nobody had done, was ask when the diner had been closed, or why or who had filed the complaint that closed it. Handsomate. The complaint that was filed 14 months before Gary asked for the divorce. Sylvia drove home from May's that afternoon and sat at her kitchen table with the folder open in front of her. She wrote Hargrove Property Solutions, LC, on a notepad. Then she wrote the date, January 14, 2019. Then she wrote Gary's full name, which she hadn't written in 11 months, Gary Allen Hargrove. She looked at those 3 lines for a while. Then she got up and made a pot of coffee she didn't drink. The next morning, she drove to the Harlan County Courthouse on Main Street. The lobby was warmer than it needed to be. That particular institutional warmth, 10 degrees too much, the kind that made her want to take her coat off and then not bother because she wouldn't be long. She asked the clerk at the health department window for the full complaint file on May's diner. The clerk, young, a name tag that said Bree, looked at her monitor, typed something, looked again. That's a 2019 filing? January. I can pull the public record. Might take a few minutes. It took 20. Sylvia stood at the window and watched Bree move between filing cabinets and her computer back and forth. The waiting area had 3 plastic chairs and a poster about hand washing that someone had put up crooked and never fixed. There was a bowl of wrapped mints on the counter. Bree's desk calendar was still open to January, the wrong January, 2 years back, a vacation photo of somewhere with palm trees taped to the top. Sylvia took one and then felt strange about it and put it back. When Bree returned, she had a thicker folder than Sylvia expected. Full submission record, Bree said. Complaint, inspection notes, follow-up correspondence. There's a contact sheet attached for the complainant, registered agent information. Sylvia thanked her. She took the folder to one of the plastic chairs and opened it. The registered agent for Hargrove Property Solutions, LLC, was listed as one Martin D. Feltz, attorney at law, T, with an office address in Knoxville. She had never heard of Martin D. Feltz. Gary's divorce attorney had been a man named Howard Wynn out of Cookville. Different man, different city, different firm. She turned to the inspection notes. County inspector who had responded to the complaint was named Carl Oubre. His notes were thorough. 4 pages dated January 22, 2019, 8 days after the complaint was filed. He had found 2 of the 3 alleged violations present in minor form. The grease trap was behind on its maintenance schedule. One refrigeration unit was running 2 degrees above code temperature. He had issued a conditional closure order pending correction, with a 60-day window to bring the property into compliance. 60 days. The diner could have reopened by April 2019. Sylvia turned the next page. There was no record of any correction filing, no follow-up inspection request, no appeal, no extension, no communication of any kind from the property owner after January 22, 2019. The diner had simply stayed closed. For 4 years, going on 5. She sat with that for a moment. The mint wrapper from the bowl was still on the counter where she'd left it. Bree was typing something. Outside, someone was arguing quietly on a phone. Her mother had run maze every day from 1998 until her knees gave out in 2017. After that, Sylvia had managed it. Part-time. Then more than part-time, while still doing Gary's books. Her mother had still come in on Saturdays to sit at the counter and drink coffee she didn't need, and tell Sylvia which supplier was overcharging on the bacon. When the closure order came in January 2020, her mother had been 74 and living alone, and, as it turned out, already sick, though none of them knew it yet. She had called Sylvia and read her the notice over the phone, slowly because the print was small. "They say the grease trap," her mother had said. "I don't understand." Carol Ubra came through last year. He said 60 days. They had assumed it was a filing error, a miscommunication, something to sort out in the spring. Her mother had died in August 2021 without it ever being sorted out. Sylvia stood up, folder in hand, and went back to the window. "The inspector on this file, Carl Ubre, is he still with the department?" Bree checked, retired, 2022. "Is there anyone I could speak with about a follow-up on a conditional closure, one that was never resolved?" Bree looked at her with the careful expression of some trying to be helpful without promising anything. "You'd want to talk to the compliance supervisor. That's Dennis Hale. He's in Tuesdays and Thursdays." Today was Monday. Sylvia wrote down Dennis Hale's name and drove to the law offices of a woman named Patricia Rowe, whose card she had kept for 8 months in the side pocket of her tote bag behind her insurance card because Clifford Brew had mentioned her name once in a way that suggested he thought she was better than him. Patricia Rowe's office was on the second floor of a building that had once been a hardware store and still smelled faintly of motor oil. Her waiting room had 2 good chairs and a shelf of plants that were clearly thriving. The receptionist offered Sylvia water and meant it. Patricia herself was 53, reading glasses on a beaded chain, a yellow legal pad on her desk that already had notes on it when Sylvia sat down. From what? Sylvia didn't know. Sylvia put the folder on the desk. She put the folder from the courthouse next to it. She said, "My ex-husband's company filed the health complaint that closed my mother's diner. He filed it 14 months before he filed for divorce. I got the diner in the settlement when it had 0 assessed value. I want to know what that means." Patricia looked at both folders without touching them. Then she looked at Sylvia. "Where'd you get the complainant name?" "Public record. County Health Office. And the connection to your ex-husband?" "The LLC appears in his asset disclosure from the divorce. Same name. Hargrove Property Solutions. His name is Hargrove." Patricia picked up the courthouse folder and opened it. She read the first 2 pages without speaking. Then she set it down and picked up a pen. "Who was your attorney in the divorce?" "Clifford Brew." She wrote it down without any expression at all. "Did Brew request full business entity disclosure from your husband's side?" "He said the LLC had no active revenue." "Did he request documentation confirming that?" Sylvia thought about it. The brown blazer. The way Clifford had moved through the asset list, like a man who had somewhere else to be. "I don't know." Patricia made a note. "Okay." Patricia set the pen down. If the complaint was false or exaggerated enough to matter, and it was filed to bring down the value of a marital asset before the divorce, that's fraudulent misrepresentation in a property settlement. She picked the pen back up. It's also potentially a false filing with the county. Those are 2 separate things. The plants on the shelf needed nothing. They were simply growing. "Potentially," Sylvia said. "I need to verify the LLC registration, confirm his ownership interest, and look at the timing relative to when he first retained a divorce attorney. If he had legal counsel before that complaint was filed." She paused. "That changes the picture considerably. How long does that take?" "Entity registration is public. I can have that today. Attorney retention records are harder, But the LLC registered agent is Martin Feltz? Yes. Patricia looked up. Something shifted slightly in her expression. Not surprise. Recognition. I know that name, she said. She didn't explain how. She wrote it down and underlined it once. If this story is landing differently than you expected, stay with it. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. We'll be right back. Patricia called Sylvia 4 days later on a Thursday afternoon when Sylvia was at May's again, on her hands and knees cleaning the base of the refrigeration unit with a brush she'd bought at the hardware store. Hargrove Property Solutions LLC, Patricia said. Registered in Tennessee, November 2018. 2 months before the complaint was filed. Gary Allen Hargrove, sole member. Martin Feltz, registered agent. Feltz has a history with this kind of structure. I'm still pulling records, but this isn't the first time his name has shown up on a filing like this. Sylvia sat back on her heels. The brush was still in her hand. There was a grease streak on her left forearm that she didn't notice yet. 4 others, she said. That we found so far. This is a pattern Feltz has run before. Whether Gary knew what he was buying when he hired Feltz, or whether Feltz structured it for him, that's what investigation would determine. Investigation by who? I'm filing a complaint with the Tennessee Attorney General's office. Consumer Protection and Commercial Fraud Division. This is not a civil matter I'm taking to small claims court. This is a documented pattern of fraudulent regulatory filings used to manipulate asset valuations in divorce proceedings. That's their jurisdiction, not mine. Sylvia set the brush down on the floor. She had a grease streak on her left forearm that she didn't notice yet. What happens to the settlement? That's a separate action. If the AG investigation confirms fraud, you have grounds to reopen. The diner was assessed at 0 because of a closure order triggered by a false complaint. That's not a legitimate valuation. A court can correct it. Clifford didn't catch it, no. A long pause. Not comfortable, not uncomfortable. Just long. He should have, Patricia said. That's a separate conversation. Sylvia looked at the refrigeration unit. 2 degrees above code, the inspector's notes had said. In January 2019. Her mother had kept that unit running since 2003. It had never failed an inspection before. One more thing, Patricia said. The original closure order in January 2020, the one your mother received. That wasn't from the January 2019 complaint. That was a second filing. Same LLC. Full December 2, 2019. Sylvia didn't say anything. He filed it twice, Patricia said. The first one triggered an inspection that found minor violations and fuel light. When those weren't corrected, because nobody told your mother they needed to be corrected, because the notices of required corrections went to the property address when the diner was already closed for the winter. He filed again. The second complaint triggered a full closure order. The grease streak on Sylvia's forearm. She was looking at it now. My mother called me when she got that letter, Sylvia said. January 2020. She said Carl Ubra had come through the year before. She said he said 60 days. He did. The correction notice went to the diner's physical address. In January 2019, during the winter closure. No one was there to receive it. The utility sink in the back, still dripping. She hadn't fixed it yet. He knew the diner was closed for the winter, Sylvia said. He'd been married to me for 31 years. He knew. Patricia didn't answer that. There wasn't anything to answer. Sylvia drove home in the dark. She stopped at the gas station on Route 9 and bought a bottle of water she didn't need and stood at the pump for longer than made sense. The temperature had dropped while she was inside Patricia's office. She hadn't brought a jacket. She stood there anyway, one hand on the roof of her car, looking at nothing in particular. The floodlit concrete, the price sign, a plastic bag moving slowly along the edge of the lot. Then she got in the car and drove. At home she made dinner, a can of soup, crackers from a sleeve that had been open too long and were soft. She ate at the kitchen table with the folder open in front of her, not reading it, just having it there. The soup was fine. The crackers she put back in the sleeve and set aside. She thought about the correction notice from January 2019. A piece of paper that had gone to a closed building. Her mother at 72, driving out to May's in the spring to start the season, unlocking the door, not knowing there was anything to find because there was nothing left to find. It had been sitting in the diner's mailbox since February, or in the pile of off-season mail she kept in the back. The kind of mail she went through once a year in March and then set aside. Her mother had not known she was supposed to fix something, and Gary had known she wouldn't know, and that was the whole plan. 31 years, and she was still capable of being surprised. She closed the folder. She washed the soup bowl. She went to bed. She slept better than she had in weeks. The AG filing went in on a Tuesday. Sylvia didn't see it happen. Patricia sent her a confirmation email with a case reference number and a note that said, "Preliminary inquiry opened. No action required from you at this stage." Sylvia printed the email and put it in the folder with the rest. She was at Maze when she read it. She had been coming every morning for 3 weeks now, working through the building section by section, cleaning, assessing, making lists. The grease trap needed a full service. The refrigeration unit needed a new thermostat seal. The floor near the back door had a soft spot that would need a carpenter before it needed anything else. She had a notebook with columns: repair, cost estimate, priority. The numbers were manageable, not comfortable but manageable. Dennis Hale from the County Health Compliance Office had come by the previous Thursday. He was a quiet man, 60s, the kind of careful that comes from working with paperwork for a long time. He had walked through the diner with Sylvia and looked at Carl Lubra's original notes and confirmed what Patricia had already told her. The violations from 2019 were minor, correctable, and had never been formally cleared, only because the correction notice had gone unanswered. "We can issue a new inspection," he'd said. "Get this property back into compliance. It's not a complicated file." He'd looked around the diner while he said it. At the chairs, the counter, the sign in the window that still said, "Closed," in sun-bleached red letters. He hadn't said anything else. He didn't need to. The new inspection was scheduled for the following week. It was Bree from the courthouse who found it, and she wasn't looking. Out it. Sylvia had gone back to return a document she'd accidentally taken home, one of the original complaint pages, and while Bree was pulling up the file to confirm receipt, she stopped typing and looked at her screen the way people look when something doesn't add up. "Huh," Bree said. Sylvia waited. "There's a related filing cross-referenced here. Different county." Bree squinted. "Cumberland, 2017. Different property, a place called Rosie's on 70. She looked up. Same registered agent. Feltz. The lobby was quiet. Someone came through the door behind Sylvia, let in a gust of cold air, moved past toward the tax window. "Same pattern?" Sylvia said. "Complaint filed, closure order, property transferred in divorce settlement at reduced value." Bree said it the way she'd read it, flat, factual, like a weather report for somewhere far away. Then something shifted in her face. This is the second time someone's used this guy. Not the second time, Sylvia thought. Just the second one Bree had found. "Can I get a copy of that filing?" Bree was already printing. She added a sticky note to the top. "Ridgeline Holdings, LLC, Cumberland Co., 2017, without being asked." The news, when it came, didn't come with any noise. 6 weeks after Patricia filed with the AG, a woman from the Commercial Fraud Division called Sylvia on a Wednesday morning. Her name was Agent Sheila Drummond. She spoke in the measured way of someone who gave information carefully, not because she was hiding anything, but because precision mattered in her line of work. The preliminary inquiry had identified 4 instances of what appeared to be coordinated false regulatory filings across 3 counties, all connected to Martin Feltz and a rotating series of single-member LLCs. 2 of the 4 had resulted in asset undervaluations in divorce settlements. 1 was still under review. The Mays Diner complaint was the most recent and the most documented. Martin Feltz had been contacted by the AG's office. His law license was under review by the Tennessee Board of Professional Responsibility. "And Gary Hargrove?" Sylvia said. "Hargrove is a subject of the inquiry," Sheila Drummond said. "I can't speak to likely outcomes at this stage." "Does he know the inquiry is open?" "He would have been notified as a subject, yes." Sylvia was standing in the diner when she took the call. The new light bulbs she'd put in that morning, the industrial fluorescent kind, the same wattage her mother had always used, were throwing proper light across the counter for the first time in years. The chairs were still worn. The floor still had the soft spot near the back door, But the light was right. "What happens to the settlement?" she asked. "That's a civil matter. The AG investigation, if it concludes as currently indicated, would provide grounds for your attorney to petition for relief. That's a separate process." "I understand. Do you have representation?" "Yes." "Good." A pause. Miss Hargrove. Sophia. "Sylvia, I want you to know, the Cumberland filing, the Rosie's Diner case. That woman's name is Beverly Okafor. She's been trying to reopen a similar complaint for 3 years. Your document was piece that connected both filings to the same agent. She'll be part of this inquiry." Sylvia sat down on one of the red vinyl chairs it held. Does she know about me?" "She does now. I told her this morning." Sylvia sat with that. A woman 3 counties away, 3 years of trying, and nobody had connected the filings until now. Until Sylvia went back to return a document she'd accidentally taken home. That was the part that was hard to sit with. The drip from the utility sink. She had fixed it last week. New washer, 20 minutes, cost her $4 at the farm supply store. But she still listened for it sometimes out of habit. It wasn't dripping anymore. She didn't hear from Gary directly. What she heard about Gary, she heard from her daughter Renata, who called on a Sunday in a tone that was trying very hard to be neutral. Gary had called Renata the night before. Not to explain, not to apologize, just to ask in a careful voice whether Sylvia was doing anything with the diner. Renata had said, "Dad, I really can't talk about that." He hadn't asked again. Renata called Sylvia after. She said she didn't know what to say. She said she was sorry she hadn't known. She said she was sorry about Grandma Mays. And she said it in the particular way of someone who means both the diner and the woman it was named for. And Sylvia understood that. "You didn't know because there was nothing to know yet," Sylvia said. "Mom, I mean it. I didn't know either." A silence on the phone. Outside Sylvia's window, a neighbor was backing out of their driveway, the reverse beep going 3 times and then stopping. "Are you okay?" Renata said. Sylvia looked around the diner. The new lights, the chairs, the compliance certificate in the folder on the counter. "I'm working on the place," she said. "Come see it when you can." Renata said she would. She probably meant it. The health inspection passed on a Thursday in October. Dennis Hale came back himself, which he didn't have to do. A junior inspector could have handled it. He walked through the kitchen with his clipboard and his careful eyes and found nothing that wasn't already on the correction list. The grease trap had been serviced. The refrigeration unit had a new thermostat seal. The soft spot near the back door had been repaired. A carpenter named Roy, 2 afternoons, the cost of which Sylvia had not written in her notebook yet because she wasn't sure she wanted to see the number. Roy had left a box of finish nails under the counter that she kept meaning to return and kept forgetting. Dennis Hale signed the compliance certificate at the counter, handed her the original, and looked around the diner one more time. "Your mother opened this place?" he said. 1998. He nodded. He picked up his clipboard. He left. Sylvia held the certificate for a moment. 1-page, county seal at the top, Dennis Hale's signature at the bottom, the address of May's Diner spelled out in full. Then she put it in the folder with the rest of the documents. The AG complaint reference number. The original health complaint with Gary's LLC on the complainant line. The courthouse printout. Patricia's confirmation email. The folder was thick now. She set it on the counter, in the spot where the coffee mug had been. The last thing she did that day was take the photograph down from the kitchen wall. It had hung there since 1998. The opening day photo, the one someone had taken with a disposable camera, the colors already fading to that particular amber of old celebrations. And Gary stood in the center, holding the ribbon they'd strung across the door. Sylvia stood to his right, slightly behind, a tray of biscuits in both hands, looking at something outside the frame. She turned it over. Her mother's handwriting, small and tilted, in blue ballpoint. Mays, opened June 4, 1998. My girl ran the books. Sylvia looked at that for a long time. Then she hung it back on the wall. Face out this time. The side with the writing against the plaster, where no one else could see it, where it had always been true whether anyone knew it or not. She turned off the new fluorescent lights. The diner went dark except for the afternoon light coming through the front window. The same window, the same angle, the same hour it had always been. on the sign outside caught the sun the way it always had. She locked the door. Her key still worked. She didn't look back at the sign. She already knew what it said. There is a particular kind of theft that leaves no broken window. No one forced Sylvia out of her marriage. No one held a gun to the settlement agreement. Gary Hargrove sat across a conference table and watched a mediator divide 31 years into 2 columns, and he already knew what the diner was worth, and he already knew what he'd made sure it wasn't worth, and he said nothing. He let Clifford Bro call it reasonable. He let the number stand. That is not a crime most people have a word for. He called it protecting what he built. The documents called it something else. What Sylvia found in that drawer was not luck. She had kept her mother's files. She had kept her own files in spiral notebooks with hand-drawn columns for 23 years. She was a woman who wrote things down, amounts, dates, names, because she had always understood without being told that the version of events that gets believed is the version with paper behind it. Gary had paper too. He just didn't expect her to go looking. Beverly Okafor, 3 counties away, had been looking for 3 years. Her diner is still closed. But she has a case number now and a name connected to hers, and an AG investigator who answers her calls. That is not everything. It is not nothing. The compliance certificate on May's counter doesn't erase 14 months of planning, or 4 years of dust, or a mother who died without seeing it resolved. And it doesn't give back the $43,000 or the house on Mercer Road, or the 23 years without a title or a pension line. Justice arrived quietly, the way it almost always does when it arrives at all. In a signed form, a returned phone call, a name in the wrong column, finally in the right one. Sylvia didn't celebrate. She turned the photograph over and hung it back on the wall, the true side against the plaster. And she went home. That too is something.